Hello everyone, Ian McDonald with Omafra, and I'm here with Peter Harvey from the Cookstown area. And today we're talking about his planter equipment and how he seeds and makes that work within his primarily no-till system. So Peter, let's just sort of talk about planting. Just give us a little history on the farm and who's involved in it.
So we're primarily a cropping farm. At one time we did have quite a bit of livestock, a beef feedlot, and then we shifted to a sheep operation. I primarily farm by myself. At one time I farmed with my dad, and then he retired, and I farmed with my daughter for a number of years, and she got married to another farmer and left me for a younger man. So I'm by myself.
And talk about what crops you grow.
We grow corn and soybeans, and a good portion of those corn and soys are in a strip cropping or a crazy strip system. So that's alternating 15-foot strips of corn and soys. We grow edible beans of some type, either cranberry beans or black beans, and wheat.
And what about your soils? And like, are you pretty much flat, or is there hills? What sort of ground are you covering?
A good portion of our land is on an old glacial lake bed, so it's very, very flat. It's close to 0% slope in some of that land. We do have some rented farms with some fair bit of slope. Actually, one farm that when we were in the livestock business, we kept part of the farm in predominantly hay. And now it's cropped. We don't even crop a couple small corners that are too steep. We try to get a lot of the land is systematically or randomly drained. Even the rented land, I've spent money in tiling. And we have a varying of soil types, anywhere from a sand to a clay. Yeah.
So across your crops, what planter gets used to plant each of your crops?
So I have a corn planter, or I guess it's corn and bean planter, really. It's a 20-inch row planter. We'd use it for corn, soybeans, and edible beans, and some cover crops. And then we have an older tie no-till drill that we use for wheat, and also use it to plant some cover crops.
And you've had this equipment for quite a long time. If you were considering buying a new planter or upgrading your planter, you know, what would be the things that would come to mind in terms of trying to make that decision?
Basically, I'm a smaller farmer, so things have to be cost effective. So that's partly why we have one unit that is predominantly most of our planting, a 20-inch row unit. So a different machine, I'd like it to be in 20-inch rows. It would have to have the capability of planting a large seeded edible bean. So something like cranberry beans are very, very large seed, and some planters don't have that capability. I'd like set up so I can get functional in a no-till, so it has to be able to handle a fair bit of residue. And I'd like it to be able to have dry fertilizer, preferably banded at 2x2. And I also like the capability of putting on some additional end source for corn and edible beans.
And is your planter a finger planter or a vacuum planter?
It's a vacuum planter, okay. Yeah.
So when we talk about the system as a whole, Peter, you know, what are other pieces of the puzzle that have to work with the planter?
I think the important thing is a tractor. And if you go to a bigger tractor, you have more weight, which I find detrimental. But my present tractor I have lacks a bit of hydraulic capacity, so we run an auxiliary pump. So it'd be nice to have more hydraulics, but again, you add more weight. And again, I would have to have large tires to try to do something with soil compaction.
And you ran into some troubles with duals on your planter tractor and switched. What was the value of that?
We were running fairly narrow duals in our 20-inch row system, and I felt I was getting too much soil compaction, so we switched to a larger tire running low air pressure, and we plant right on top of the tire, and I think it works quite well. I can't visually see much difference between on top of the tire track or beside it. So.
And do you know what PSI you're running in the tractor and the planter?
Running about 11 in the tractor, and my planter is got fairly high pressure, but basically when everything's in the ground, there's no weight on the tires, So the only time there's weight on the tires is in the headlands, and they do get beat up a bit.
Very good. Is the planter that you have, recognizing that you custom built a lot of it, do you think that the planter for a no-till cropping system has to be different than for a conventional system?
I think today's planters have a fair bit of capability of doing a decent job. So basically, all you have to do is get seed and fertilizer in the ground. Um, and I think some of today's planters maybe have that capability, but they still probably have to be tweaked and some add-ons put on them. That's just my opinion. I'm the age, I'm not really looking for too much new equipment. So
In the context of having a planter that's efficient and does the job in the no-till system, what are the must-haves that that planter needs to be equipped with?
I like dry fertilizer, capability of banding dry fertilizer. Um, it has to be able to get seed in the ground, fertilizer in the ground. In corn, I like some capability of having a clean row to plant into. Um, I like something that's fairly low maintenance, uh, that isn't a lot of work to keep running. Um, so I guess we have done some work in my planter that I've kind of farmer engineered. We switched all the single disc openers back a few years ago because the make I had, we couldn't seem to keep bearings in them very well. So I switched to a different make, and so we didn't have to do near as much maintenance on the bearings.
Are there any nice to have options that, if you won the lottery would be your first thing to purchase for the planter?
Um,
Downforce and uh, electric clutches, all that type of
yeah.
thing?
Uh, I think some electric drives so I could change population by row in my system would be nice. Uh, I haven't had any need for downforce or anything. I seem to be able to get my planter in the ground without any issues. Uh, but depending on your planter configuration, it might be needed. And again, I'm running fairly small equipment. I don't have a lot of wings that are basically having issues getting in the ground. But I think longer been a no-till, the ground's been more forgiving, a little easier to get things to work into. Yeah.
And you put this planter together, but it's Kinsey parts and stuff like that and other pieces. So, was there any game changer at the time that you put that planter together as to why you did it the way you did it?
It was a bit of an evolution. We tried some things that didn't work, but the basic principle has been uh, fairly consistent. Again, single disc fertilizer openers. We did try some double disc openers originally, and then we tried some coulters with down tubing, and they basically either didn't put seed in the ground or plugged up. Uh, and uh, and the ground-driven fertilizer nitrogen pump, that was I think after about 1 or 2 years we put that on. It basically works well versus something that is more speed dependent on the tractor.
Very good. So now I just have a series of pictures of some of your situations and equipment and stuff, and maybe we'll just talk to the pictures, Peter.
Sure.
So this is sort of fall of, or I can't even tell you what part of the season that
I
is, but
think
that's
that
your
was,
crazy strips
yeah.
after harvest.
So you can basically see that where I planted the corn and the soybean stubble, there isn't a whole lot of residue there. We have enough earthworm activity that most of the residue disappears, but there's a pile of corn stalks. So we're planting, a high population of corn with pretty good yields, and we're planting right on top of the row. So that is a challenge, and that's the only reason I really run any coulters in my planter, is to basically deal with those corn stalks. This picture is some cranberry beans that were basically no-tilled into cereal rye that was about knee high.
And this was it already terminated when you planted?
Yes, this was terminated about a week and a half, 2 weeks prior to planting. I do that in edible beans just because of the limited options for weed control versus soybeans. We don't have a whole lot of selection on what herbicides are available, so I don't want to take a chance on a high-value crop having an issue with some weed control.
So this is sort of a view of your planter. So how wide is that? 15 feet, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's 15, so 9 20-inch rows.
Very good. And this is from behind.
Yeah.
It's very, that distance is very full of stuff of that 15 feet.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's not a lot of room for trash movement in that. So in corn stalks, we take all the trash whippers off because we just make it into a big plow, just make big pile of. And occasionally we do even have it bung up. Yeah, the odd time. Like
When you see this picture, there's a lot of different components to this. So maybe just talk us through from the drawbar back.
okay, I guess I mentioned the tires on the tractor, and the next component is a ground-driven nitrogen pump, and then there's some coulters there, and one of the coulters basically set up with a pencil injector for 28% N. It doesn't do a perfect job of incorporating the nitrogen, so we're using a urease inhibitor to try to work around that. The dry fertilizer box, it basically goes down to some single disc fertilizer openers. Then some nitrogen tanks, are just basically some saddle tanks that came off a tractor. And then a ground-driven planter unit. So everything's pretty low tech. The fertilizer, dry fertilizer, the 28, and all the seed is all ground-driven, and it's a vacuum planter. There's trash whippers on that, Keaton seed firmers, and spike closing wheels.
And like it seems very high. How is it for filling?
It's not a big deal. The 28 and the Alpine tank that's on the front, I forgot to mention that. Basically, we just have quick couplers. We use a wagon with an auger for the dry fertilizer, just reaches that, and it's not a big issue. The only issue at the end of the season, we have to clean the fertilizer boxes are up in the air quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. And how many acres of fill do you get roughly?
I try to configure so we're running about almost 15 in corn. So try to get my fertilizer and my 28 to run out close to the same time. So there's fertilizer extensions on the boxes to basically. So we spend a bit of time filling, and it slows down planter efficiency a little bit. But once we get into edible beans or soys, there isn't quite as high a fertilizer rate. So it's a lot quicker.
And these are some more close-up pictures. I don't know if you need to talk to any more details or not.
No, it just basically shows the ground-driven. So it's pretty low tech, which is good because usually the only problem I have is a chain comes off, and the monitor will show that. Oh, it's basically just showing the amount of residue. Like it's a bit of a mindset planting into that much corn stalks and think you're going to get a soybean crop. But the soys do come up, they do grow.
How uniform is your population year in and year out?
In terms of soys?
Yes.
Yeah, it'll vary a little bit. We sometimes have a bit of a slug issue, and the odd time there is a few misses, but soybeans compensate fairly well. And that just shows the spike closing wheels. And try to keep fairly good openers on it, and the trash wheels are off in that picture, and there's I guess that's the adjustment for the ground-driven pump for the Alpine.
Talk a little bit about the tie drill then, and where it fits in the system and how it works, because how many year old is that unit?
Not sure what year it is. I think it's a 98 or something, so so you don't have to have brand new and fancy equipment to make no-till work. So that tie drill, we kind of try to keep good openers on it. And I have Keaton seed firmers, and we have coulters in the front. Last bit of planting I've done, I haven't put the coulters in the ground. I've been able to get enough seed depth without putting them in the ground. And we've modified it to have a dry fertilizer box. So I had a metal fabricating shop that basically retrofitted an old seed box to put on dry fertilizer.
And that feeds into the same boot as the seeds falling down?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it does a decent job. If I have no-tilled soys with it, I won't get quite as good a stand as I would with my corn planter. In terms of wheat, it does a fairly nice job. Maybe not the perfect depth control of a newer technology, but again, I'm only running 500 acres, so I kind of got to keep my costs in line. So my goal is to basically keep my machinery costs less than custom rates.
Sort of moving on to, helping others in their planter change decision or upgrading. Are there any sort of mistakes that you made in direction or pieces of planter that you bought that you would steer people away from because it just didn't work out?
I think I mentioned I like single disc openers for dry fertilizer. Not too many other things I put on that haven't worked well. I've done a fair bit of modification in making the planter work better in terms of some planter coulter setup and stuff, but nothing too major except the dry single disc fertilizer openers.
And any advice to others when they go to think about replacing their planting equipment?
Um, I'm not a real expert at replacing equipment because I have a tendency to keep stuff until I can't get parts for it. Uh, but I think you got to make sure you got the horsepower and to handle whatever you're buying. I
Well,
hear.
you mentioned about hydraulic fluid flow and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So
Okay. Is there anything next in the planter department that you're looking at?
I'm trying to get some more overwintering cover crops into my system. So we basically have an APV cover crop seeder that we modified to try to put cereal rye into standing corn. I'm still struggling making that work. Hopefully I can make it work better this season.
What's your timing of that?
I had been doing it in my strip systems after the soys were off. Primarily, I'd like to do it in September, but I used to always be combining cranberry beans when I should have been doing that. And so everything I do in my farm, you got to prioritize a little bit what's going to be the most beneficial, not in terms of just soil health, but dollars. So I hope to do it in September this year because I haven't got cranberry beans. I've got black beans.
Very good. So, Peter, that brings us to an end, and I just want to say thank you very much on behalf of those that will have a chance to see this video, sharing your planting experience with us, and thank you very much.